come once again to discuss things.
Because it's dumb. That's why you.
It's terrible. It's just sad.
Yeah, speaking of things that are dumb, terrible, and sad, let's start another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Partu. Joining me today is the Comics Kid 2099, and back yet again is Steve Baxey.
Hello.
Hello. We are on a review topic this week, and Steve is now back. Steve is back in black, probably. I mean, there's like an 80% chance you're wearing black.
I own very little clothes that are not black.
Yeah, that used to be me. I'm branching out. So Steve's here, and he picked our review topic. What are we reviewing today, sir?
Today we are reviewing the modern masterpiece, Blade Runner 2049.
Not to set it up on too much of a pedestal.
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. This is just my favorite movie of all time.
Oh my. You know, I watched this and I think about it. This is like the fourth movie that Ridley Scott has done. Fifth if you count Hannibal to an extent. About just machine thinking.
Well, Ridley Scott didn't do this one.
Oh, well, like produced it though, right?
Yeah, but he was barely involved. His name is just on it.
Oh, really? That's really surprising because it's got so many hallmarks of all his stuff. It's like,
if I remember right, I think Scott came out and said that he didn't really like it.
Really?
I think so. He said something about it being too long, but I mean that seems weird given Ridley Scott movies these days.
Yeah, I don't know. I can't understand it because this seems like so up his alley.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, okay. My point. Giant idea here is kind of washed to the side because I think this is kind of a thesis for what Scott has done in so many of his films, and I thought it was a really interesting torch passing kind of moment, and to find out that he doesn't like it is a bit weird to me. Maybe he doesn't like it because they did it better than anything he's ever done with it.
I mean, that's probably fair. He was originally attached to direct it, but something came up and he didn't. I don't know the full story, but it seems like Denis Villeneuve had basically complete control over the whole thing. That's
cool. All right. Ruben, what do you think of this?
Well, this may be an interesting episode. I did not care for this movie. I thought it was just very boring. And I don't have any interesting, nuanced reason for why I just didn't enjoy it. I will agree that I think it's too long. Agree with if that's what Ridley Scott said. Although I will also say, like Ridley Scott, the only other recent movie that he did that I watched was that Robin Hood movie, and it was like about as long as this movie. So that's a little weird that he said that. But I think you could have. You guys will probably both disagree with me. I think you could have cut at least 45 minutes out of this movie and had basically the same movie. I've seen the first Blade Runner movie, and Ian, correct me if I'm wrong, you have not, right?
Never.
Okay.
Still haven't.
So I think that it's in a lot of ways, it's very similar to that movie, and that's a movie I enjoy a little bit more than this one, but I don't necessarily think either movie is, air quotes, enjoyable. It's not an entertaining movie. It's a very, gut-punching, thinky movie, and that's a big reason why I didn't enjoy watching it.
I think that's fair. I tend to agree with that a little bit more, but legitimately, I was really enjoying this film. Just on an entertainment level, it's got a lot of really great things going for it, cinematography-wise. It's got a really interesting and intricate plot. There's some cool action set pieces here and there. I disagree with you there. I think that, you can change the plot of this movie, keep all the same shots, and it's still, a really, visceral experience from time to time. I don't see how you could have been bored during this because I feel the pacing's pretty damn good on it.
I would say it's really hard to contest that this is one of the best looking movies there is. Like, just purely if you take any random shot, it's 90% of the time completely gorgeous and perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah,
it's stunning to look at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it reminds me a lot of like Lawrence of Arabia in that way. Where it's just like every shot in that movie is jaw-dropping. And this has a lot of that same stuff. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to hear Ruben. This is the hill you're dying on, buddy.
Like I said, I have nothing to say beyond I was bored to tears. Like about the hour and a half, 2 hour mark, I was lost. Like this movie completely lost me by that point. I struggled to keep up with it, and so
was this your first time watching it?
Yes.
Okay. I could sympathize with that view since you just watched it at home. I think what this movie is, and part of why I like it, is that I saw it twice in theaters, and I will grant anyone that having to sit there for 2 hours and 45 minutes watching even if it's not necessarily unentertaining, a very slow and deliberately paced movie like this, it's exhausting, and if you're not trapped in a black room with complete silence staring at nothing but the screen, it might be hard to pay attention. Because, it's a slog. Like, it's a epic kind of scale.
Yeah, I had to make sure I, like, didn't let myself, flip through Twitter while I was watching this the other day. I did have to monitor my behavior because I knew I wanted to make sure I was devoting my attention. And it's a bit like I have to do that when I watch, like, a Kubrick film or something.
Yeah.
Because you can easily zone out of it, and it can lose your attention because it's not pandering to your attention. It's doing one of those things where it's deliberately showing what it wants to show, not what you want to see.
Yeah. That's a perfect way of putting it, I think.
Yeah. So for me, I do really like this movie. It's not my favorite or anything, but I do think there are a lot of really interesting ideas here. We did a whole Geeky Gentleman episode on the idea of whether or not machines can think, and there are so many just little lines and moments in here that perfectly portray both sides of that argument, and I really, really fucking love it. Because can machines think is an interesting philosophical question that you can debate for all of 10 minutes with a layman. And then the thing gets way too abstract and way too weird, and at that point you just kind of have to give up and move on. Whereas this does something that people don't give enough credit to. It's art that is showing a philosophical argument in a really deep way. It is in the same line as Plato's dialogues in a number of ways, and I really, really like that about it. So, you've got, like, Jared Leto's character, who I'm sure actually killed a woman to prepare for this role. You got him, and he's got, like, just the best line in the fucking movie when the fish jumps as he's about to interrogate Decker. He says, "Always jumping, that one. No idea what it'd do if it ever reached land." And that's the whole argument for machine thinking and machines involving the evolution of artificial intelligence and evolution in general. That's that whole fucking argument right there in like a simple shot and a line of dialogue and like a fucking splash sound effect. It just perfectly conveyed so many ideas in an instant, and I love it for that.
Jared Leto's a trash human being, but his character has some of the most important thematic lines, and it kind of bothers me. Because I don't want him to, but he does.
Yeah, no, like I said, I'm sure he killed a woman to prepare for this. Like, I'm sure they just brought, like, a random streetwalker or like a homeless person into the studio and promised him food, and then Jared Leto just killed them on set, and they're like, okay, we got the shots. And everyone...
I think in his first scene when he's killing the woman that I like a lot, that I think is kind of the crux of the whole movie, where he says, "Pain reminds you that the joy you felt was real."
Mm-hmm. That's really good. And then there's just all these other little moments, like the Joy character. I find her really, really interesting because My whole take on the question of machine thinking is, no matter how complex you get at it, someone put that someone put an idea into the computer, and the computer put it through a process and spat it back out. No matter how deep you get, that's the fundamental thing, is someone physically put that exact idea there, and the computer pulled that. And that's fundamentally not the same as someone having a genuine reaction. And so the moment that like kind of makes that argument is when he's so attached to this, VR Joy character, and then he's walking through the streets, sees the advertisement for her, and she goes, and like the advertisement walks up to him and says, "You look like a good Joe." And it establishes that his quasi-girlfriend character did not name him Joe out of some deep-seated like love and respect and some true emotional relationship. She named him Joe because she was programmed to think of the word Joe.
There's a meme that's been going around which has an image of Ryan Gosling from that very scene. And it's done in like an Onion-style headline where it's like, hopeless man loses what last bit of hope that he didn't realize he still had. And that is that scene.
Exactly. I love that so much. So there's all these really, really intricate ideas. And I will say, if you're not familiar, if you haven't thought about this stuff, like me at 3 o'clock in the morning, then a lot of this probably won't work as well for you. But at the same time, I feel like the plot that's here is legitimately compelling and should be enough to keep you going. So, Ruben, you don't think that the plot was very interesting. You said you lost the plot. Can I just try to get a general sense of where you went wrong? Can you explain to me what you think the plot was and where you got lost?
Well, like I said, I think the movie just drags on. I think that the plot that's there, I think, is fine. I think also this is a situation where your expectations can really screw you over when you go into something completely cold. I think I saw one trailer for this like over a year ago, and I had forgotten everything in that trailer. I didn't remember anything about it. I knew that Jared Leto was in it. I knew Ryan Gosling was in it. I thought Harrison Ford was going to be in it more than what he was. I mean, he's in it for 10 to 15 minutes maybe, and then like Edward James Olmos, who is in the first one, and if you know him from Battlestar Galactica as I do, he's completely unrecognizable in that first movie. But then here he's in it for like 3 minutes. So like I was expecting more of a action-y team up between Harrison Ford and Ryan Gosling, and that's not what the movie gives. And you two are both huge into philosophy. I'm not. So like you were talking about how this is like a modern take on Plato's dialogues, and I've never read those, and I have no interest in reading those. And that's no offense against anyone who likes those things. It's just not where my interests lie. And so that it lost me, I mean, I guess I could say it lost me even earlier than that. Like, there are action scenes. You're right about that. Like, I really like the fight scene between what's his face, Dave Bautista and Ryan Gosling. I think it's very visceral. It feels real, where a lot of scenes feel more choreographed. I like the fight scenes between the muscle. I can't remember her name, but
Love.
I like the fight scenes between her and Ryan Gosling. Although I feel like the line "bad dog," I don't know why, but that I laughed, and I don't think the movie wanted me to laugh when she said "bad dog" when she killed the dog. I don't know why, but I don't think.
No, she doesn't kill the dog.
Oh, she doesn't.
No, she knocks Gosling down because he's he's a bloodhound to her at that point.
Gotcha. Okay, so I either wasn't paying attention or I misremembered, because there was a dog there at that set in that scene, so I misremembered completely. Anyway, it's got some good fight scenes, but I think going into it expecting it to be more of a action-y type movie, expecting more of Harrison Ford's character, and also like really just sitting there wishing that it wasn't 2 hours and 45 minutes long. I think that's all kind of, it all came together for me. It all combined.
Okay. Well, no, you just said like you lost the plot of the movie, and I was curious about that because I've heard people talk about this and say they had no idea what was going on, and like, of course it's YouTube, so these exist where people are like, the end of Blade Runner 2049 explained, and I'm like, what's there to explain? He says, go see your daughter, and then Harrison Ford goes in and sees his daughter. Like, why does that need explaining?
Apparently, the guy that did the music for the final shot when he's just laying in the snow, that spit hit of music is called "Time to Die," just like the line that Roy Batty has at the end of the first movie. And Michael Green, who wrote the movie, actually came out and said was very confused by the fact that people didn't realize that Ryan Gosling dies at the end. Like, he thought it was super obvious.
Yeah. I thought that was obvious. Like,
mean, and I say that because I don't think Ruben's alone. I think there are a lot of people that were confused, if not kind of lost by the movie. And it seems like to anyone that gets it, it seemed really, really obvious. And to anyone that didn't, it seemed really, really contrived. And I've never really quite seen that reaction. It's usually one or the other.
Oh, I definitely knew that Ryan Gosling died at the end. But I don't know if maybe I shouldn't have said the plot lost me. I think there were just the movie had trouble keeping me engaged. I think is a better way I should have said it.
Okay. Let me ask you this, because I was expecting when I first went to watch this, because all right, so here's what happened. Haley and I were on our honeymoon back in October, and we had some time to kill one day, so we decided to go see a movie, and Blade Runner 2049 was in theaters, so we're like, oh, let's go see that. I mean, Steve's on Twitter talking about how much he loves it. Let's go see it. And it is like such a just not a good honeymoon movie, by the way, but like it was like really, really empty theater, and it was just really, really fascinating to watch. And I don't know, man, there's something about it. Like, I expected to be so lost on this because I'd never seen the original Blade Runner. And then it's not that this movie has nothing to do with the original Blade Runner, because it's quite important to it, I feel. Is it? Like, am I missing something, or do you think this works better without watching the original Blade Runner?
I think it works both ways, which is partly why I like it, because I've shown it to a few people that have never seen the original Blade Runner, and for the audience that hasn't seen the original Blade Runner, Ryan Gosling's character becomes all the more interesting because his whole existential crisis becomes the entire framework, because it becomes entirely about, here's this guy who's a nobody who thought for a brief second in time he might be special, and turns out he's not, and that's really sad. And if you watch the original Blade Runner, as much as that's in the movie, it feels like the original Blade Runner film starts to become the emotional crux by the end, because you see Rachel again. Ryan Gosling never actually comes face to face with Jared Leto at all, and it's Harrison Ford. So it kind of ups that movie's connection more by the end. And if you like the original movie, that plays for you on a different emotional level. And if you didn't, then it's all just waxing philosophic and giving you theme stuff to make Ryan Gosling's character more important.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. Because, like, when Rachel shows up, I'm like, I get from the context that this is the woman from the first movie.
Yeah.
I have no idea what her relationship to Harrison Ford was specifically. And so, like, when he looks at her and he's like, Harrison Ford is a great actor for someone who's, like, always just seems to shrug it off about how easy acting is, but like he has such this look on his face, like you really feel like you're looking at someone who's reunited with their long lost love, and he's like, her eyes were green. I'm just like, holy shit.
Also,
that moment changes
another
everything.
checkbox for digitally restoring actors and looking really, really good.
Yeah, no, I didn't know that was not the original actress or not a lookalike when they showed her.
Yeah, there's a actress that they got that like knew her voice, and then they just digitally put Sean Young on top of her.
Yeah, no, I had no idea. It helps I've never even seen the actress before, because not to anything I'm aware of. I've never seen the original Blade Runner, so I have no frame of reference for who the actress even is. But like I didn't know that. I was talking with a guy at work about movies and stuff. I was like, oh, I saw Blade Runner 2049. I thought that was really, really good. And he's like, oh yeah, didn't that have like the most realistic digital character in it? I'm like, who? And he says the girl that was in the first Blade Runner, the actress couldn't come back or whatever. I'm like, oh shit, that was a digital character. So it was a cool little moment. There's a discussion to be had on that whole thing sometime, though.
Ian, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
You seem like you have deliberately avoided watching the first Blade Runner movie over the years. Is that true?
Not so much deliberately. Like, it is a movie that I know I'm going to have to commit some time to if I'm ever going to sit down and watch. And at this point, it's in this annal of things that just have such a reputation that I know if I ever watch them, it is not going to be able to live up to that reputation for me. And so at this point, I just rather not watch it because I'm going to just remain blissfully ignorant. Because it was funny, Connor Nielsen left a comment on a video a couple weeks back where I was like, making a point about Citizen Kane. He's like, and then I say I'd never seen Citizen Kane. He's like, well, then why'd you make that point? I'm like, because it doesn't fucking matter. Everyone knows Citizen Kane. That's why I made the point. And I've still never seen Citizen Kane, and I have no plans to ever watch Citizen Kane. Kind of the same thing for Blade Runner, to be honest with you. It's too important now to be watched properly.
I think this is better. I don't mind that. I mean, there was a part of me at some point in history that would have been all over your ass for not watching Blade Runner, but I'm like, nah, this is better. I don't care.
Well, like, okay, so here's the funny thing. And here's something I've noticed about you, Steve, because, yeah, Blade Runner 2049 was 2017, Logan was 2017, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, your two favorite films from 2017, you had absolutely no interest in seeing and thought they were going to be either pointless or bad.
Yep, this is accurate. It's completely accurate.
Please go into that, because I find that interesting.
So, the thing about the original Blade Runner is there's, depending on which version you watch, there's either overt text or just really random subtext about whether or not Harrison Ford's character is a replicant. And it's sort of like Killing Joke in Batman, where by the end, there's a kind of ambiguity, and if you do anything that deliberately follows right after, you have to address the ambiguity. So, like, did Batman kill Joker or not? If you make a direct follow-up, you have to say yes or no. If you put it in canon, you have to say yes or no. If you make a direct follow-up to Blade Runner, you have to address, by the end, yes or no, was Deckard a replicant? And by the very nature of Harrison Ford aging, the answer is probably no, he wasn't. And so that initial vagueness and that kind of lostness in time that original story has gets tarnished a bit when you do stuff like this. However, part of what I really like about this is it addresses that ambiguity head on, and it makes it say it doesn't matter. Like, one of Harrison Ford's first lines is when Ryan Gosling's talking about the dog, he's asking if the dog's synthetic or not, and Harrison Ford's just like, you have to ask it.
Yep.
Like, that's the movie, right? Like, do androids dream of electric sheep? Yes, they do.
Yeah, no, I really like that. That's another one of those moments where it so perfectly boils down this really complicated argument, and it just goes to directly at it. Because we talk about machine thinking again. The big thing was the Turing test, right?
Yeah.
Have a conversation with someone that you don't know whether or not that someone is a computer, and then tell whether or not you think that someone was a computer. And if you think it was a person there and it was really a computer, then we've created a machine that's sufficient enough to think. That's a flawed test, and frankly, people cheat at it whenever they do win, from what I've seen. But the argument's all there. And so that all comes down to this moment where he's like, is the dog synthetic or not? The real question is, are you synthetic or not? And the answer given is, ask him. Ask the question directly. So, like, the best way to pass or fail a Turing test, just ask the person directly, "Are you a machine?"
And, and you haven't seen the original Blade Runner, but there's a fun kind of inversion happening in this movie from Harrison Ford's character in the first one. Because in the first one, he is hired to go to the guy that's made the replicant's house to administer the Turing test, but in that movie it's called the Void Comp test, on Rachel, who is a replicant. And it takes him like over 100 questions to figure out whether or not she's a replicant, and it turns out she is. And the big point of the movie, as far as that test goes, is that the number of questions it takes to figure out the answer is completely arbitrary, which means the test is meaningless. But the deeper part is Rachel doesn't know she's a replicant, and she finds out like part of the way through the movie and has an existential crisis about it.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, her whole thing in this movie, or her whole thing in that movie, and Harrison Ford's whole attitude towards her is completely inverted when you get to this movie with Ryan Gosling's character, who knows he's a replicant from the beginning and is trying to find a reason to why he might be human.
Yeah, and then he's like, "Oh no, I'm not human or replicant. I'm something in between." No, you're not. No, you just murder your own people.
Yeah, no, I love Ryan Gosling's character in this movie. I think he's one of my favorite characters in all of film just because of how understated and tragic the whole thing is. Because the whole movie is, here's a person whose life is meaningless, who's given a chance to potentially have meaning, and then it's ripped away from him. So he says, "Fuck it, I'll do the right thing anyway and die."
Yep.
Like, it's so sad. It's so sad.
You're just like, "Oh yes, a really sad movie. Sweet."
One of my favorite shot-for-shot comparisons is in this movie where it's the shot where he figures out the memory he has is real versus the shot when he finds out he's not actually the kid. Because when he's meeting the actual daughter and he finds out that the memory's real, he lets loose like this goddamn scream, and like he's completely unnerved by it, and it's the most human reaction he has in the most opposite way he feels in that moment, because he wanted to be special, but it doesn't seem like he was emotionally prepared to handle it in that scene, versus later when he finds out he's not special and it's completely subdued and robotic again.
Mm-hmm.
It's really good. It's so Ryan Gosling has more like subtle range of his acting in this movie than he's ever had anywhere.
You gotta wonder like how much of that's just the script, and I've talked about this a lot. It's really hard to play robotic. It's really hard to remove emotion from a performance. And like just naturally you're a person, you're not emotionless, so to act emotionless is really difficult. Because things will just subtly creep in, and Ryan Gosling manages to pull it off really, really well when he needs to. And so I really like that about it. Ruben, you've been quiet for a while. What do you think of the performances in this?
I liked Gosling. I liked what we got of Harrison Ford, and I think that comes mostly from having seen the first movie. If I had not seen the first movie, I probably wouldn't have cared as much about Harrison Ford. And my expectations would not have been a Ryan Gosling, Harrison Ford smash team up type thing. I did not care about Jared Leto. He's in it for like 5 minutes maybe. And I mean he is the antagonist, but I feel like he's so absent throughout the entire movie that I mostly just, every time he's there, it's like, oh, Jared Leto's in this movie. I forgot. And like, I kept, because you and I, Ian, a little bit last week, we talked about, is he a good actor or not? And you said, like, watch the movie Lord of War. And I was going into this thinking, like, well, maybe he's going to be, like, doing some really good, powerful acting. And I couldn't tell you. I still couldn't tell you. The only things I've seen with him now are Suicide Squad and this movie. And so I don't know if he's a good actor. I don't think he's in it enough. But most of the other principal actors, I think, are really good. I like Robin Wright. She's not in it a lot, but I like her in general. And so I think what she does here is the gruff police captain. It's a very well-seasoned trope in noir and detective movies and stuff, but I think she brings something to it that's interesting. So yeah, I think more or less most of the performances here are pretty good.
Okay. Yeah, it's crazy for me. I completely agree with Steve. Jared Leto's kind of a shitty person, but damn, I just love him in this. He's so fucking creepy and unnerving, and just, like, the first time we see him, he just murders a woman. And yeah, she's a robot, but, like, it's like, you're here to inspect the new model, and he inspects her and just kills her because he's mad that it can't have a baby. And like it's so fascinating, and he's just, I don't know, he's got all the best lines in the movie. I've taken us to 9 planets, or not nine worlds. He uses the word worlds, which is really fascinating in and of itself. I've taken us to 9 worlds. A child can count to 9. And I'm just like, shit, that is the most capitalistic mentality ever.
I love that line so much.
Yeah, there's that, and then there's all the visualization around him, because, like, okay, so Ryan Gosling's character has a little wooden horse at one point in the movie, and he gets it analyzed to see where it's from and all that shit. And the guy tells him, "Oh, it's real wood. You can get anything. Passes off world, real horse, whatever you want." And it's like a little 2-inch thing of wood. And then you look at, like, Jared Leto's office and where he is. Everything in his building is covered in wood. So the implication is that not only is he outrageously rich, he's extravagantly rich.
There's the other thing, too, where he's blind, but his office, his building, is the only place in the entire movie where there is natural sunlight.
Yep. That's weird.
Terrifying.
I didn't think of that. I'm sorry?
And it's not even like windows. Like, it's just weird panels of light shooting in random directions. It almost, like, hurts your eyes.
Mm-hmm. It's weird, and, like, there's shots where you can see, like, kind of an eclipse, and you wonder how it's doing that and stuff. And that's probably got symbolism to itself, too, and I can't even begin to scratch the surface of what the imagery of an eclipse means within the context of those scenes.
And I mean, it's just, this kind of movie is loaded with that kind of stuff intentionally, where, like, the movie opens with that all-seeing eye, just like the first Blade Runner does. Deckard being a replicant or not is implied in the first movie because he has a dream about a horse, and so Ryan Gosling's whole thing with the toy horse is the same symbol. The fact that, like, every time he's in his fucking flying car, he gets shot down. Like, there's just all of this little stuff packed right throughout the movie that you could pile layers and layers and layers of meaning onto. But it all comes down to that really, really simple point of, like, what does Ryan Gosling feel like he needs to do?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that goes on with Leto's character, and I gotta give the man credit. He's a damn good actor. He's an asshole.
Yeah, no, he's a terrible human being, needs to be shot, but really good at it.
Yeah. Yep. Like, if the job of an actor is to lose themselves in the performance and show you the character, and he does it. I can't deny it. He does it. But man, he's an asshole.
The thing about the casting, before we move too far away from that, that I really like is that it's really only Ryan Gosling's movie. Because if you add up the screen time of literally every single actor in it, no one has even a fraction of the same amount of screen time as Gosling does. Like, everyone is in the movie 5 to 15 minutes tops, except Ryan Gosling.
Yeah.
Like, even
that's really
even
cool.
Joy, like, Joy is the most prominent character, and she's barely in it compared to him.
Mm-hmm.
It does that really good old school film noir thing of, like, it's always just that one character, and we just, like, get guest casting of all these big name actors to do, like, 5 minutes of work each.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a good point. I really like the way that plays, because it increases the isolation in the crowd kind of thing. And that's really
exactly.
cool. Now you mentioned the cars getting shot down and stuff. So I think the action in here is legitimately compelling and interesting. Steve, do you think that it's distracting or feel like it's unnecessary to what's going on in the movie?
No, I didn't process it as action, as far as I can tell, except for the final fight with Love, which is very clearly an action scene. Every other fight scene or action scene in my head just always seemed like, and now things are going to shit for about 30 seconds. Like, it always felt like here is a quick shoot way to change the status quo and make something happen. It never felt like stop the plot now, watch the action for a second, and then get back to the plot. It always just felt like it was abrupt and necessary, and the plot was moving with the direction of the action scene.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I was feeling about it. But I just know that, like, I feel like you're not used to that kind of stuff in a movie like this, right?
Well,
In a movie that's really thinking.
not in a movie with this many big name stars with $150 million budget. That's apparently like a sci-fi epic. Like, this has less action than the original Blade Runner does. I think.
Wow. Yeah, like, I don't know.
And the
this is
original
such
Blade Runner was like only half the length too.
Wow. This is such a thinky movie. You're just not used to, okay, and now he's going to pick up that guy and break him over his knee like Bane, and now, and like, I mean, how weird is it? It's a movie with a fucking professional wrestler in it. By the way, Dave Bautista is a much better actor than I feel people are giving him credit for.
Dude's got
Yeah.
range.
I think maybe people are only giving him credit for being like a monosyllabic like thug because like I don't watch wrestling, but you know, most wrestlers you don't think of them as very like you don't think of them as being very like thoughtful and then like he's plays Drax in the Guardians movies and he's not a very smart character. So I think a lot of people have kind of that image of him as a person. But then you watch this, and you're right. It's very much like he's a good actor.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, doesn't get a ton of time to do stuff, but man, does he do stuff.
Yeah.
How does it
yeah,
feel
yeah.
to kill your own kind? My kind doesn't run. I witnessed a miracle. Oh, God, it's a good scene. It's a good scene.
The director of this, Denis Villeneuve, it's French. I don't fucking know. This dude is one of the best directors working right now because he not only made this, but like his career for 4 years straight was Prisoners, followed by Sicario, followed by Arrival, followed by this.
Oh, wow.
Like he did all of those just back to back to back to back.
Prisoners was the Hugh Jackman one, right?
Yeah, that was the Hugh Jackman, Jake Gyllenhaal one. Then Sicario
that's a hard
was
movie to
that
fucking watch.
drug movie with Benicio del Toro, and then Arrival was that Jeremy Renner, Amy Adams movie that was like the best movie of 2016.
Yeah, I remember seeing, like, hearing about all of those. I only watched Prisoners for this show, oddly enough. And I had mixed feelings on that one. What's he doing?
Didn't we?
Yeah. What's he doing now? Like, is he working on something else now, or is he taking a break
He's
from
making
being
a
awesome?
Dune movie.
Doom? Really? Okay.
Yeah, he's making Dune.
Oh, Dune.
Yeah,
Dune?
not Doom, Dune.
Okay. That's really exciting because, yeah, he pulled a lot off here. And I'm surprised they gave him that because this movie was such a fucking flop.
Yeah, I did not do well.
That's craziness.
Which I mean, part of me is kind of happy it didn't do well because I don't want to see Blade Runner like hyper commercialized and turned into a franchise. I kind of dig the whole. We had Blade Runner in 1982. Now 2017. Let's go back real quick.
I don't know. It's an important movie, if nothing else. So it got to have an impact years later. Again, I think it's so funny that like I can't help but feel like this is everything Ridley Scott was trying to do in Prometheus. Like,
Yeah.
Prometheus is not a good movie, but it's got like really good lines every so often. Like that line with David and the one scientist dude is like, you know, we created you because we could, David. And he's like, think about how disappointed you would be if your creators told you the same thing. And like that's a really fucking good line, and it could very well be in this fucking movie.
I kind of wish low-key Michael Fassbender got to hang on to this franchise as opposed to Prometheus and Alien Covenant.
It happened. So let me ask you this. This is like kind of the nerdier thing, and I don't know when else we'll have a chance to bring it up with this. Ridley Scott years ago confirmed that Blade Runner and Alien were set in the same universe.
Oh,
Yes.
God, I hope not.
Oh
Well,
yeah, that was confirmed forever ago.
In the I guess promotional material for Prometheus, Guy Pearce's character, he was mentioning that he had a friend who lived in a pyramid, and that's very strongly hinted to be what's his face, Tyrell from the first Blade Runner movie. So like, I mean, if you just watch the movies, then it's like it's not there at all. But like it's in the extra material, I guess you could say it's like, oh, okay.
Ew. No. Nope.
You mad about this?
I don't. I do not like it. I'm just gonna pretend I didn't hear it.
Okay. No, it's interesting to think about in what context that those two line up, because I'm trying to remember when Prometheus takes place. Isn't it like 2149 or some shit like that?
It's quite a bit away from this, yeah.
Okay, so somehow replicants got worse. I don't know.
Yeah, and well, in the first Blade Runner movie, there's this really beautiful shot where one of the first replicants that he kills is just like wearing this weird-looking see-through raincoat, and like she gets shot, and like blood just goes everywhere, and it's real-looking blood. And then in the Alien movies, when a robot bleeds, it looks like milk. And I mean,
well, okay, let's all establish one thing. The Alien franchise does not give a single fuck about continuity.
no.
So that's
I feel like with Covenant Origins for a lot of that stuff, these movies can't possibly still be in the same universe, but not mad about it. Just gonna pretend like it doesn't exist.
just gonna pretend. It's like the Wayland Yutani is like the offshoot of Tyrell and Leto Inc. post the robot apocalypse that is obviously incoming.
I mean, that's probably accurate, all things considered.
Yeah. I don't know. There's just reminds me of another great line that Leto has that gets into the whole commentary on capitalism in this movie, where it's like, we lost our taste for slavery. There's
That's
so many
line.
we
lost our taste for slavery.
Is it our taste or our stomach? It's one of those two. It's just so like he looks down on the abolition of slavery. Is just such a like evil, just so perfectly evil. And like what makes it more is he's saying all this to Love, who he obviously, through his actions, by comparison, given the fact that he fucking guts one 2 seconds later, who he obviously does not care about. He calls her Love as almost as a joke by implication of his actions. So he doesn't give a fuck about her, so he's not telling her this. This is just him thinking out loud. Like, this is his private time to just think out loud and reflect on what he sees as his own personal failures.
See, and part of what I like about him in this movie, more than what I like about Tyrell in the other movie, is that very clearly Jared Leto is a terrible, terrible person as far as we can evaluate from what his character says and does. As far as this world's concerned, no, he's not. Mm-hmm. Like, for this world, he is completely sane and normal, if not a genius and a good person, probably.
He's the Steve Jobs.
Yeah, like the creepiest thing about this movie is that we can talk about it in terms of Jared Leto being the antagonist, but he's kind of not. He's just this world. He's just exactly what this world is, and the only conflict anyone has in this movie is entirely internal that just happens to manifest outward sometimes, and nothing changes. Like, by the end of this movie, not a damn thing changes about anything. More people are just dead.
Well, there's definitely the implication that there is a robotic revolution coming, right?
Oh, yeah, sure. It's just, as far as, like, who Wallace is and the trajectory of this world, nothing really changed. Like, this was all going on along the motions, but, like, Wallace never gets anything against him. He doesn't even, like, know who the fuck Kay is in this movie, probably. If He probably knows him vaguely that he exists, but nothing else. What Harrison Ford chooses to do with this daughter, no one has any clue of. Like, there is a great amount that could happen, but the level of how insignificant so many of these actions are is also kind of scary.
I think that's fair, and I want to talk more about the daughter character because Leto's probably the best character in this movie to me. But the daughter character is also really really interesting because she's introduced like it's that show should not fucking work. Just it's so goddamn contrived, and I just don't care. You're so emotionally drained, and you just want to cling to any shred of happiness that it totally sells itself. When this character who has gone to help give information on the mystery and for the script writer to wax poetic more about do some philosophizing about the nature of memory, which of course is in and of itself a commentary on the machine thinking thing. That all comes together, and she just so happens to be the daughter of Decker, is such a fucking contrivance, but it so works. Just it shows you how emotionally drained this movie leaves you, and so to get that little bit of thing of happiness at the end, you're just willing to accept it.
Yeah,
I think is really really interesting.
And I kind of like part of what I like about her character is that I wonder how much she actually knows. Mm-hmm. Especially given that memory and why she would put it in any person she chose to put it in, and like there's a lot of like interesting side events happening in this world that are projecting it towards some kind of uncertain future, and depending on which character you pay attention to, it's either too big for them to comprehend and so they can only do their little victory, kind of like the classic noir character, which is Ryan Gosling in this, or it becomes a lot more inspirational and moving, which is what Harrison Ford's character needs after the last movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, it depending on what angle you come at this from versus old Blade Runner versus this one, like, there's just so much happening.
Yeah, and, like, you know, she's got such a different dynamic compared... Like, I think it's really interesting, and you could probably compare it. She probably doesn't have as much, but I think she's got a similar amount of screen time to Leto. And I think she's the polar opposite. Because, like you mentioned, Leto's got, like, this very natural-looking environment. You know, we've got the wood, we've got the water, we've got the sunlight. Is there any plant life in Leto's office?
Probably. I don't remember, though.
Okay, so we've got all these natural elements, and Leto is so concerned with the synthetic. And then we've got her, and she dreams about the natural and literally the natural world and just the sense of like touching someone, and yet she's in a perfectly synthetic environment. And that's really, really interesting how they juxtapose on that level, how they juxtapose within the context of the story, how they there's just so much going on there, right?
Oh yeah.
Like she has compassion for the replicants, and Leto clearly has none, because it's weird because Leto calls them his children, and yet he has no care for them whatsoever because he guts one, and she has care for them because she takes so much time in crafting and perfecting the memories she gives. It's such an interesting juxtaposition between these two characters. They're perfect foils for each other.
Yeah, I agree completely. I love it so much. There's kind of like a paternalistic versus maternalistic thing happening there. There's kind of a on the ground versus wrathful God kind of thing happening. Like, it's so layered.
Mm-hmm. And God, so like it's stuff like that where the more I think about it, like I literally what you heard me talking about there when I was mentioning trying to think through all the stuff in Leto's office, that was me putting together the difference between the environments in which they are shown.
Yeah.
Because like another thing, outside of her home, it's all snow. It's all dead.
Yeah.
Shit.
There's so much fucking things happening in this movie, and it's one of those movies that like you can very easily sort of like bracket and talk about artistically, and that's fun, but I also think it's kind of cold. Like there's a lot of symbolism and a lot of internal consistency and a lot of like parallels and stuff that you could talk on like some sort of artistic level, but all of it just comes back to Ryan Gosling, and all of it just comes back to these are people who are trying to figure out whether or not they can mean anything.
And the answer is
so
no.
internalized. It's so sad. Like there's a shot where Ryan Gosling is just like staring at his hand, like not knowing what to do with himself, and it's one of the best shots in the whole movie.
Mm-hmm. And then there's really interesting things with Ryan Gosling, where he seems to have completely and been perfectly fine accepting his role as just a machine, but then he does things that are like so counter to that.
Yeah.
Like when he's in the archives and he needs to look at the human DNA samples, right? He asks the computer to do it for him, when he shows that he's perfectly capable of doing it himself. And
There's
so if he were if he were a proper machine, he would just do it himself to begin with. He wouldn't ask another computer to do it. But there's this underlying humanity to him in that scene, and that's really interesting.
Well,
because not only does he end up doing it himself, he like sighs and is clearly annoyed that he has to do it himself.
Well, and I love that because part of what surprised me about him so much in the movie is that if you just watched the trailers and you went into this movie cold, you did not know he was a replicant. Like, right. Nothing led you to believe that he was replicant except the first shot of the movie. And now it's absurd to think he would be anything except a replicant. But in the opening of the movie, he's clearly a replicant doing a replicant thing. And then he goes home and he plays fucking Frank Sinatra and Elvis and has a hologram wife and a hologram food over his regular food. And, like, has witty banter with her and shit. Like, it's really sad. He's trying so hard to just be a dude.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's depressing.
Yeah, and like he's just completely even in that like, you know, quasi suburban lifestyle that he wants to lead, you know, he's reminded of his non-humanity because right on his fucking door they got like the whatever they're calling replicants as like a slur. They've written it on his door.
Skin job?
Yeah, whatever that was. Yeah, it's right there. It's just like his escape is filled with reminders.
Were you as weirded out by the what are those things called? The baseline tests? Both of them?
Okay, that was one that went way the fuck over my head. So, Steve, I'm going to give you the floor and you're going to explain those scenes to me.
Of all the things, it's the baseline test. Yeah, so I saw the when I saw the movie, I think those were probably the most like unsettling scenes to me because it was just so weird and so cold, and it seemed like it was completely random. Turns out it's not. So the baseline test, as far as this universe is concerned, is like, I suppose, the sequel to the Void Comp test, because the Void Comp test was just a series of questions, and the baseline test is a series of statements, and your ability to relate to the statements is what gives away whether or not you're a replicant or a person. Because the whole point is supposed to be, the more you start drawing lines from one statement to the other, the more your psychology is being compromised and you're not thinking like a replicant anymore. Every replicant in this movie understands that they are one and they have a job to do, and that anything beyond that baseline is problematic and indicative of what happened in the first movie, so kill it and get rid of it. And so the first baseline test, it's all the same lines, but Kay is very clear and consistent about only using like the cold baseline words, like the connector words and stuff like. So like He'll say cells interlinked. He'll say interlinked over and over again. He'll say cells over and over again. But he'll ignore the sentences about like feeling and touch and anything that would vaguely lead him to make some other conclusion. Then the second baseline test, he can't do that. And he starts using other words that are related and still sound cold, but are reflective of the more of the emotional state thing. So like instead of saying interlinked in cells over and over again, he'll say dreadfully, he'll say dark, and he'll say against, like the responses change and they become too interrelated. Apparently the actual text of the baseline test is from a novel from the 80s. I don't know what novel it is, and I don't remember if like the novel actually does anything with it or if it means anything within that context or whether the reference to it in this movie has anything to do with anything. But apparently it's just like it's the same series of questions and it's responded to in the same sort of way. And if you actually pair up the interlinked sentences and Kay's responses from the beginning of the movie and the end of the movie, they're all reflective of what he's doing and what his arc eventually becomes. So like there's one in particular where he's like, what's it like to be filled with dread? And he says dreadfully. And the next one's like, do you like being separated from other people? Distinct. And he responds distinct. And that's after he realizes he might be stuck.
Apparently that's the novel that Joy offers to read him at one point.
Is that what it is? Okay. What is that novel called?
I don't know. I was reading the trivia on the movie before we started, but apparently in the text of the book, it mentions something about like finding. It's something about, I don't remember exactly what the phrase is, but it's something that is like very appropriate for a Blade Runner hunting or for a replicant hunting other replicants, like finding flaws in his fellow replicants. Like it's a very appropriate line of dialogue or line from the text, and I don't remember what it was, but I don't remember the name of the book either. But I do think it's it's a very good text to use in this context.
I'm just gonna. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I love it. I think both of those baseline tests are like some of the best directed and intense scenes in the movie. I'm just gonna look up what the novel's called real quick.
No, like I like the scene, and I got the premise that it's like a test to make sure that he's behaving within the proper baseline. I just didn't understand the context for the words chosen and what that stuff was. Like when they have the line like, when you're done with your job, did they unplug you and put you in a box or something like that?
Yeah.
Like, that was pretty obvious, trying to get under his skin if he was, ashamed of being a replicant or whatever. But, like, that scene is just, it's so quick and it's so complex. I'm just like, okay, I'm not adding all this up right now. A lot of this is going over my head. So, no,
yeah,
what you're talking about really makes sense.
It's one of those things where, like, if you actually break it down and try to give it a purpose within the universe, the lines are kind of bizarre. But the lines are also chosen very distinctly to pair up with parts of the movie before they're meant to pair up with what's supposed to be happening in that scene. Does that make sense? Like, it's not like if you were designing a test like the Void Com test and you made up these interlinked words, that actual sequence of wording would not work the way you want it to work. But the words are intentionally chosen enough that they are meaningful for the movie if you're watching it as a movie.
No, that makes sense. It's like you could almost, the way I suppose you could connect it and make it more apparent, and it's probably a better choice not to do this because that would break the immersion, is if you made the movie non-linear and you had those scenes be, you had the baseline scenes separate out the scenes of the movie.
Which,
like,
if you're
that's how Christopher Nolan would have directed this film.
Yeah, no, that'd be Nolan's Blade Runner. Which, and with a 2-hour and 45-minute runtime, that probably would have been even more exhausting. The novel is, for anyone who cares to read it, called Pale Fire.
Man, all these sci-fi novels have such great names.
It's a Russian novel from 1962, and there's actually quite
Russian.
Yeah,
no kidding.
Russian. Apparently, there's quite a bit of quotes from the movie that actually, or from the book that ended up in the movie, like Tall Fountainhead, Real Boy, stuff like that. Joe, the
Okay.
her name goes to Brett.
Okay, as long as it's not a child can count to 9.
Um, Within the novel, the 999-line poem Pale Fire is the autobiographical story of John Shade's life, the central fact of which is that his beloved daughter, Hazel, drowned herself as a teenager. Oh, that's interesting. So there's a poem inside the novel that's kind of parallel to what the movie's about. That's interesting.
Okay. Well,
Why
I
is
know
it
what's on Steve's reading list now.
Yeah, I'll get that to check out whenever I have time. I'm actually really curious about that.
Oh man, that's funny. Okay, what else can we talk about with this one? We talked a little bit about effects in regards to the CG character. It's so weird to talk about effects in sci-fi movies these days because now you're just kind of expecting it, right? But as someone who's really into 3D and stuff, I was really impressed with the level of, I don't want to call it subtlety, but the level of immersion that is in this, because I've seen shots from the original Blade Runner, and it's very much, showing, there's this element of pride to it. There's this element of showing what we're capable of now. Whereas this, like, it just seems like it's also just there. People are just walking past it all.
Part of it's because they did so much of this movie using miniatures. And it's just fantastic how much work they put into making that look good. They got they had 3 or 4 different experts and directors who do exclusively miniature work for those parts of the movie.
Okay. That's cool. I was thinking more of the giant CG billboards.
Oh yeah.
Like Joy as a billboard is it's so poignant and beautifully tragic in the story, but just it's a giant pink naked lady. There's just something that's so grabbing about it, but it just becomes so immersive. You get so much context for what this world is like from the fact that you can just have a giant naked pink billboard. And that's really, really interesting to me. Then there's the dancing ballerina in the town square, and people are just so annoyed and just walk through it, not even caring. I don't know, there's just something about that. It's this high-tech equivalent of the guy on the street handing out flyers. And what's so interesting about that is I want to say it's in Times Square. Coca-Cola put up a new billboard that's highly digitalized, and it's got a bunch of these square panels that kind of flip and rotate and turn, so it creates really unique animations, so you can kind of get a more grabbing visualization of Coke pouring in a glass or whatever, compared to just plain video, because you've got this 3D element to it. And I know about that because I watched a video of someone videotaping the fucking billboard, because I'm a caveman, goddammit, and it's a shiny thing. But 10, 20 years from now, no, people are just gonna be fucking annoyed with that and just walk right past it and not pay a goddamn second of attention. And it's this evolving thing, and so it's so interesting how they portrayed something so visually beautiful and made it seem so goddamn mundane.
Just the whole architecture and usedness of this movie is fantastic. Blade Runner almost single-handedly invented cyberpunk, and then this movie just ups it to 11.
Mm-hmm. So I don't know, a lot of shit like that was really, really interesting. I like the inventiveness of some of the weaponry used here. It's not just bang pow guns. I like that they harpooned his fucking car with a kite made to get it struck by lightning and fuck the car over.
I know,
that was really
so clever.
Cool. It was a really inventive little move right there. I thought that was really neat.
I also really like that Kay is consistently robotic in his action scenes, where he can just rapid fire kill 5 guys with a gun.
Mm-hmm.
That's really cool.
Yep. Yeah. And then there's like,
also, because this is just fun, and I think it's hilarious, and I want you to use the picture of it if you can find it. The scene where Harrison Ford and Ryan Gosling first meet, Harrison Ford's like trying to beat the shit out of him, and obviously Ryan Gosling's a replicant and could break him if he wants to, so he's just kind of like standing, taking the punches. Harrison Ford accidentally really punched Ryan Gosling in the face, and it's in the movie.
mm-hmm.
And it's hysterical because Harrison Ford's face is just so priceless.
Yeah, I've heard Harrison Ford tell that story. He's like, he didn't apologize because it was Ryan's fault for not moving his face.
Yeah.
Just like, Jesus Christ, Harrison Ford. Someone who just clearly does not give a fuck anymore.
And speaking of the architecture of the movie, like you were talking about earlier, that whole scene with like the constantly intermittent musical performances in the background is so good.
I mean, it's shocking as hell, and it feels like the sound of a record skipping.
Yeah, it's so interesting how disjointed it is, and how even like the Elvis music is indicative of some of the themes of the movie. Like, Can't Help Falling in Love with You being about Rachel and Harrison Ford, and that Frank Sinatra song being about Ryan Gosling. Like, it's so deliberate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought that stuff was really cool. I will say, just on an immersion level, world building context for the story, if there are people living in fucking junk villages out on the outskirts of LA, I gotta believe more people than Harrison Ford are chilling in irradiated Vegas. I can't lie. That one seemed a bit ridiculous to me that Harrison Ford was the only person in Vegas.
That's probably fair.
Where did the first Blade Runner movie take place? I don't remember if it specifically said what city it was in.
Say Los Angeles? I feel like it said Los Angeles.
Okay.
I mean, I don't remember perfectly, but I feel like it's about... It seemed like it was about the same kind of setting.
Okay. I don't know. Then
I
haven't seen Second
Noirs take place in Los Angeles, so I'm just assuming it also took place in Los Angeles. I don't know though.
Really? Yeah, you got like what, Chinatown and I never thought of that.
Chinatown, Big Sleep, Maltese Falcon. I think those are all Los Angeles.
Well, it's funny because when Archer did their season where they're private eyes, they're in Hollywood.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I hadn't thought of that. That's funny. Okay, what else can we talk about for just a minute or two, or do we want to just go ahead and go on to ratings? Anything anyone wanted to make sure we brought up?
The soundtrack is so good.
It was so immersive I didn't notice it, so yes, it's good, but not in any way I can comment on.
It's one of those soundtracks that periodically when I'm having like a really bad day and I just want to drive in the darkness, like for an hour or two, I'll play the soundtrack, and the moodiness of it just is so good, and it's so repetitive and nice and easing.
Nice.
Like, the soundtrack isn't... The first Blade Runner soundtrack is kind of like intermittent with weird techie noises and stuff, where like it sounds like it's more classic cyberpunk and weird and alien. This one's not. This one's more like mellow and consistent and constantly unnerving, but never like there's never really any big moments of bombastic music or like any sort of like digital effect cuts. It's just constantly somber in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
I hardly ever pay attention to soundtracks, so I wouldn't be able to. I in the same way Ian was kind of saying, like, it didn't take me out of the movie, so I can give it that much.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and go into ratings then. Ruben, before we do that, let me ask you one question. Did anything we said, since I noticed you were like very quiet and just didn't have much to say, which is totally fair because Steve and I could talk about this movie for fucking hours. Did anything said in this like make you go, okay, wow, this is a lot better than I thought it was?
Not really. I'm not much. I don't really go into theme a whole lot. It takes me multiple viewings before I can really say, so that's what the theme is about for anything. For me, the first few viewings of anything, I'm going to be paying more attention to plot, and I'm going to be paying more attention to like character arc, but theme is not something I usually pay a lot of attention to, and that was a lot of what you guys were talking about was thematic stuff. And so it's not that I was not convinced. It's more that I was like, I don't really know what to say about that. Like, you guys had a lot to say about Jared Leto, and I had very little to say about him. I was just like, oh, he's in it a little bit. So like, I don't feel like this is not a movie I'm ever going to watch again. But like I said at the beginning, like you guys are really into like philosophy and like, what does it mean and stuff like that. And like you were talking about like, is a robot a thinking, evolving thing? And like, that's all over the first Blade Runner movie. And I feel like you were saying like, this is similar to some of Ridley Scott's other work. And I think it's because this movie really is taking a lot of the first Blade Runner movie and just running with it in a certain direction. But
with a blade.
Yeah.
Sorry, when else was I going to get that opportunity? No, that's fair. I was just curious, because sometimes we'll get, like, an episode like that where, like, someone will be one way on a thing, and then we'll, like, just talk the fuck out of it, and then they'll go, you know what, I guess I'm wrong. It doesn't happen often. Everyone's really stubborn. Okay, well, let's go ahead and go on to ratings. I'll go first, because it's not a surprise. I really like this movie. I think it's a great movie. It's obviously not my favorite or anything, but it's damn good. So I'm going to give this 5 out of 5 child slaves.
I'm going to give this 5 out of 5 Ryan Gosling's faces to punch.
Okay.
I'm going to give it 2 out of 5 holographic breakfasts. I think it looks beautiful, and it's, I imagine it's a very thematically rich movie, and if I watch it multiple times, I would probably come to appreciate it more. But just watching it this time, I didn't really care for it. So it's not like a 0 out of 5 or anything like that, but not as high as what you guys had it for. For me.
I guess before we close that, just because I feel like maybe this is something I should have mentioned beforehand, but there is a reason I picked it. It's not, which is weird that now that we're closing the episode, I'm going to explain why we watched the episode in the first place. But anyway, I picked it partly because not only is it my favorite movie, but like, weirdly enough, because you said you weren't really thinking about theming, and that's not what does it for you for the movies, but I picked it because I thought it was really relatable. Like, I am in no way, shape, or form in a good place in my personal life at all, and so like, this movie is just super relatable, and everything about it just clicks with me on an emotional character level. Like, the whole philosophy of whether or not robots think is not in my head at all when I'm watching this. It's entirely just, wow, here's a person who wished he was special, and I get he's not. And like, it's just really depressing. We're recording this episode one day late because I needed a day to like emotionally process being able to talk about it without like breaking down. Like, for me, it's just a really, really personal movie.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair, and I can see why that connection's there for you, too. And I just kind of get lost in the, I don't get a chance to talk philosophy enough with people, besides you, Steve. So, like, I just get like, ooh, yay, philosophy, let's talk about that. I'm excited. Because for some reason, movies and plays and books tend to do philosophy better than philosophers. So yeah, all that stuff's really interesting to me and worth talking about. But I don't know, I feel we kind of covered the gambit, talked a lot about different aspects of this. Okay, well, it's my turn for a topic discussion. And this is gonna be a heavy one, so this should be fun. Let's talk about gatekeeping next week. That should
be fun.
Yeah, that comment section's gonna be pretty friggin' sweet.
That's gonna a whole lot of social justice warrior propaganda.
I know. So that should be fun. We'll talk about gatekeeping. Obviously not just in comics. I think gatekeeping is something that's in literally every fandom. And you know what? Let me broaden it out just a little bit more because I don't think it's gonna be possible to talk about just gatekeeping without talking about the other thing. Let's talk about gatekeeping and toxic fandom.
Yes, I like this. I like this a lot.
Okay. All right. So that should be interesting. Everyone, thank you very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I'm the Exile.
I'm the Comics Kid 2099.
And we are your geeky gentlemen. And we'll be discussing things.
Ah, I love